Whispers of the stone circle. They sent him out along the old section road that hadn't been graded since a winter before he moved to the county. It was the kind of assignment that asked a man to pay attention in a way that felt fair. Check culverts. Count broken boards on the footbridge over the seep. Note where water had learned a new path. He took the truck as far as the rock berm and stepped down into grass that had agreed to keep its seeds for later. The air smelled of iron and crushed fern. He shouldered his pack and felt the straps find their old grooves against bone and muscle. He liked work that fitted him back into himself this way. B mid-morning A marked a signpost that leaned where it shouldn't. T in 100 yards of trail fringe, where grass had decided to be a path instead of a margin. He wrote neat notes in the weather pad. He paused to drink and watched gnats do their small, spinning over muddy spots, like they'd been instructed to guard them. That was when the trail fell away from the familiar cut and carried him along a low rise of ground he didn't remember noticing on the map. The pull was casual, just the way a slope suggests itself to a foot that wants to keep walking. He smelled the clearing before he saw it. A smell like wet stone that has been held in someone's hands and then set down. He stepped out of the shade and saw the ring. Stones the color of old teeth, some leaning a little, some with backs straight, all with their faces furred in moss like the kind of men who let their beards keep them warm every winter. In middle, a low lift of ground, as if the earth had inhaled and forgotten to finish. Fern had made a tidy skirt around that swell. The whole place had the stance of a worker on break who still kept his gloves on. He stood at the edge of it with his pack strap biting the same place it always did and tried to think of practical names. Boundary markers, field ring, a farmer's grudge settled with stone. But there was no wall, no fence line, no history of pasture here you could read in what grew. He stepped into the ring because to stand outside felt like making a speech, and he did not have one. The air changed. It did not cool. It did not warm. It took on the thickness of air that has just left a mouth and has not quite lost its shape yet. He went to the nearest stone and put his hand flat on it. The moss was slick, with its own comfort. Under it, the stone held warmth. He felt a hum there. Not sound, not warmth either. A small, stubborn vibration you might get standing next to a big motor underload. He took his hand away. He wiped it on his pants. He stood a while and told his breath to go easy. The day went busy again. He rounded the circle, measuring by paces he did not count, and then he backed himself away from it because pushing luck takes practice, and he had not come here for that. He kept to the loop and did the parts of the job that could be written down. He told himself he would mention the ring to someone who liked to keep a head full of such odd places. He did not mention it. The ring sat behind his ribs, like a name he would not yet say. He slept fine that night. He had the good kind of tired that brings a man down slow and keeps him there. Then sometime past the hour when houses loosen their hold on themselves and wood starts to admit it is wood, he woke to his own heart running a notch fast. He lay still and let ears do what they could. The fridge said, "It's a comfortable thing." Water ticked in the pipes like tiny feet in a hollow place. Beneath that, a far vibration climbed up through the bed frame. It was not the road, and it was not the train, and it was not anything mechanical he could label. It had the rate of a thing that kept time with something alive. He went back in the morning with sandwiches under waxed paper and a proper measured tape. He took photos and felt foolish, and took them anyway. He said, "Good morning" to the stones. Not out loud, but in the polite part of his head you use with an animal that might, if convinced, let you come close. The air met him with a weight like a set of hands. Not urgent, not unwelcome. He sat on the low swell at the center, though. He told himself he would not be the kind of person who did that. He put the tape away and pressed the heel of his hand into the ground. The hum came up into him again and set a pace. He made himself stand. He walked the outside edge, looking for sign. Nothing. No ash, no broken bird bone, no bottle glass. This was not a place that held parties or prayer meetings. It held itself. On his way back, he thought about lunch and about the woman at the office who asked after his nights without asking after them. He thought about the way he had learned to thank his own body for flaring up when it wasn't tea needed and then to ask it to take a seat. He thought about how good it was to be outside where lungs knew what to do. The circle sat under his thoughts, like a smooth stone in a pocket that did not bump or scratch, but did not let itself be forgotten either. The ring pulled him back again 2 days later when he had meant to go the other way. He came in from the north side and found it waiting as if he had been running late for an appointment neither of them had written down. The ground gave once under his foot instead at a ripple that lived lower than a quake and higher than imagination. He said in his chest, "All right," and put both hands on the nearest stone and swallowed whatever old need he had to ask permission. The moss accepted the heat from his palms and gave him back something cooler in return. By now, he believed in the hum. He felt it lay itself along his spine and count. He tried breathing to it as a test and at once did not like the feeling of being measured and liked even less the feeling of refusing. He took his hands off the stone and stood for many breaths, breathing to his own count, while the ring did what it did, which was to breathe to its own. When he had his own back under him, he walked, and he could tell the difference between the part of him that wanted to move, because this place made it hard to hold still, and the part that wanted to pretend this place had nothing to do with him at all. He kept the circle secret. Not as a project, as a courtesy, the same way you don't tell the whole town about a neighbor who leaves his window open at night and stands there smoking and saying nothing to the trees. If you say it aloud with the wrong tone, the thing you spoke about will change into something else. He told himself he was just doing his job. The body has its old drills. He knew them, the way a carpenter knows where his thumb ends and his hammer begins. The drills were loyal and tiresome. The fast breath, pretending to be anger when really it is fear. The tight jaw pretending to be thinking when really it is a guard on lunch. The stomach learning to take less, because the urgent breath and the tight jaw had made a bargain without it. He had been taught a set of little rituals that helped keep the machine from writing him into a corner. Count the breaths, lower the shoulders, put the tongue down from the roof of the mouth, unhook the hands, say thank you, that will be plenty. He did these in the ring and saw that the ring did not care. It was bigger than drills and smaller than them at the same time. He came at dusk, because any thinking man tells himself that day is safer. The light came in thin through pine, and the ring wore it without complaint. He stood inside the circle and ate his sandwich slowly, because there is a respect in chewing that the body recognizes as an old kindness. Halfway through, the ground trembled enough to ask a man to pay attention. He did. The stones did not move, but the edges of them learned a kind of glow that would make a doctor frown and a nurse say, "Let me see for myself." Not bright. Not bright. Not even the color of anything he could name from the world. Something a little wrong that I tried to repair and could not. He swallowed without finishing his food and felt it go tight down his throat. He listened to the hum and knew it had found his heart. The match between the two went a little off and then a little closer, and he did not like the sense that something outside had taken hold of a part of him he had always had to manage on his own. He thought, leave. He did not move. The ground under his boots told him in the strangest polite way that it would be better if he stayed. He remained standing because that felt more like leaving than sitting did. The hum put a hand on his chest and made the decision for him. He sat. The swell was soft under him in the way old ground can be without being wet. Grass lifts and then lies back down and holds a man in place as if it had practiced for this. His own breath reached up into his throat and paused like a creature stepping to the edge of a stream. The stones made a sound then. Something that wasn't a sound at all until all the little pieces of it arranged themselves into something a body could use. It was music, only because there was nothing else to call it. Not a tune he could whistle even if his mouth had agreed to try. A set of notes that could have been an old machine running or a set of lungs with odd manners. Each beat collected him from the edges and asked those edges to move inward. Each interval reached into a shelf of old alarms and pulled one down and opened its lid and showed him the small useful animal that lived inside and needed feeding. The body knows when it is under review. The body knows when it is being offered a simplification and has, for once, not been asked to pay a price for it in advance. He let the breath come as it wanted. He did not cry. He did not speak. He placed the palms of his hands upon his thighs the way people do in offices when they are trying to look like they are not about to stand up. The notes went on. They were not cruel. They were not gentle either. They were indifferent in the way wind is indifferent to whether a thing it touches is a tree or a man. He thought of nothing good. He thought of everything small. The wool hat on the back seat of the truck flat with wear. The sound a metal spoon makes inside a ceramic mug if you turn it slowly and do not lift it out. The little city street where he once waited longer than he ever had for a walk sign that never came. The breaths he had kept counted for someone else in a room that smelled like lemon cleaner when the nurse had left and the machines had all agreed to rest. The quiet that follows a door closing after a voice has said, "I will be just outside." The notes folded those things into themselves and mixed them and made a paste of them and smoothed that paste into the space between his ribs, the way you might fill a gap where old wood has given up. Nothing in him broke. Nothing healed. Something he had not had a name for lived there now, and it had the measured patience of old craft. He stood when the light had gone past the point where a practical man stays. He did not remember standing in between sitting and walking. He found himself outside the ring without recalling the steps. He did not turn his back on it in the childish way the body sometimes demands when it feels outmatched. He faced nothing, and then he faced trees, and then he faced the path, because paths are honest. His heart took many long minutes to settle itself back into the old habit. He spoke a word to the dark in his chest, not aloud, because saying anything out loud would have been an act of rudeness. He said, "All right." Work kept him honest. The next days, he replaced the plank that had lifted. He set the signpost, right, with a brace that would not win a prize, but would satisfy scrutiny. He trimmed a branch that had decided to spear the footpath and would not take no for an answer. He drank coffee warm and grim from a lid that did not fit. He slept when a tired body sleeps because that is what bodies do. When he woke in the thin hour, the hum in his bones was gentler and the body's old drills had put themselves back in their drawers for a while. He thanked them. He told them to rest. It told nobody he liked the weight of keeping it. Not pride. Not exactly. A sense that if he poured this into another ear, the measure would be spoiled and they would both have to pretend in a way. That would steal something useful. The ring did not require anything of him that he could not give. It did not ask for words or objects or sacrifice. It asked that he stand in it and remember to breathe in a way that did not lie about what sort of animal he was. That was a fair price. He learned the rings. Manners. Step in at the same place each time. Say nothing with the mouth. Keep hands down, unless the body absolutely must place one against stone. Sit only when asked, which feels like the minutes just before a rain starts in a town that has been hoping for one and has prepared its roofs. Eat only if hungry, and if hungry share a crumb with the ground to quiet some old guilt that is older than his memory and lives in the space between teeth. Lia when a certain line of bird calls changes key. Do not think of the word sacred, because that word brings other words with it, and soon you are not thinking of anything but words. Once, he brought a friend as far as the edge of the old section road. He did not do it with intent. The man had been driving him back from a supply run and had said, "You ever get out past the seep in that backtract? I hear weird things about that place." He had said something that was not a lie and not an answer. The man had laughed the way a person laughs when they have chosen a subject because they liked the shape of their own mouth around it. The truck had slowed of its own accord. The friend had said, "You want to walk?" And he had said, "Another time." The friend had not pressed. Friends learn the size of one another's fences and decide whether to keep standing near them. They had driven on, and both had felt better for the decision. Another day, he found the ring in a different light. A low, heavy gray lay over the world like a metal lid no one had been able to lift. The stones took that and sent a thin shine off their faces that made them look wet. He put his hand against one and felt it warmer than in sun. He did not remember taking his hand away. He remembered instead the shock of knowing that the rhythm under his palm had changed. It was not matching him now. He was matching it. He did not bargain. He did not agree. He knew the difference. He made himself laugh, and the laugh stayed in his throat like a swallow that had lost the way out. He began to find the music in odd places. A light fixture at the office would buzz at the end of the day and fall into a rhythm that turned his head. The train whistle lay a little flat one afternoon and sank into something under it that his skin recognized. He walked past a laundromat and the drum of a machine found the exact wrong rate to calm a body and came around and hit the exact right rate, and he stood on the sidewalk a long time, nodding slowly and knew enough to be ashamed of how happy that made him. The ring taught him the cost of leaving. The cost was never money and never blood. The cost was walking away with the measure still in you and trying to set it against things that had not asked to be counted. He drove home and caught himself timing the intersections with his lungs. He stood at the sink brushing his teeth and put the pause before the next breath where he had been putting it in the ring and watched a man in the mirror who had learned a new habit he would not be able to explain at dinner. He began to stand a long time in the doorway after unlocking the door, like someone setting his ear to a pane to see whether the house had something to say to him before it let him in. On a day that had been made longer by other people's needs, he went up in the evening with rain threatening and found the ground at the center of the swell softer than any day before it. He did not sink into it. It accepted his weight without letting him go. The glow at the edges of the stones was dull, old bruised color. He shut his eyes and everything in him that had been resisting sat down. It was not surrender. It was the sane motion of a person who has carried a thing from one side of town to the other and found, on the stoop, that he can set it down and the person inside will take it. He thought he might not stand again. The body disagreed. It had other days left in it. He stood. He left. He went out and did the things people do who want to be good. He returned when he could. He kept it to himself and took care to keep it from owning the parts of him that had to stay fit for cars and forms and hammers. He believed it would continue this way until the ring changed its mind, or he did. The body has a habit of reminding a man that choices and outcomes do not always consult one another. He woke one night to the sense that a foot had slipped short of a stair. Every part of him went bright and ready and stupid. He sat up and remembered the ring and heard, not wheat airs, a single note move along the floor. He breathed to it, and it breathed to him, and the bright fell away. He slept and woke to his own heart behaving. He drove out to the end of the old section road without planning to, and walked in. The ring held dawn the way a bowl holds water when a hand has been steady. He said the name of the forest in his chest again. The ring said it back, with the kind of accuracy that can hurt if you are not prepared for it. It happened the night the weather opened and let cold in without bothering with manners. He had meant only to put a hand to stone and say evening and go. The ground said lie back. He did not. He stood. The notes came up through his boots and made calves and knees and hips understand the mistake. He sat. The notes learned his heart. His heart stopped trying to teach them anything. The ring found the last fear he kept down in the tight place behind his ribs and lifted it out without. Comment the way a good mechanic lifts a part and says, "You see, this is how it goes." Everything after that belonged to the slow work of being counted. He did not struggle. He did not relax. He let his lungs perform the old job, lengthening where they were told, shortening where they had to. He watched the light thin and flattened and lift, as if something had put a hand under it and tipped it like a plate to show him the way grease runs. He felt the fear break into 100 spare parts and lay them out on the low swell where any person could have picked him up and said, "So that is what it looks like." He kept breathing because there was nothing better to do and no good reason to stop. When he finally stood, nothing in him cried out that the future had been stolen. The ring had eaten what it would eat, and he had fed it, and they were even. He walked out slow, and the trees made the papers of a book for him to pass between. He reached the truck and put his forehead to the door frame just to feel metal and small human dent, and the heat the day had kept for him secret from the air. He drove home and parked badly and fixed it and parked again and went inside and stood a long time in his kitchen and did not turn on the light. He slept and woke and slept and woke and walked the long, slow path of a person who has decided to keep being alive. He returned to the ring the next day because not doing so was worse than doing it. He stepped in with his hands open. The air fitted itself around his ribs like a belt on the notch it had decided was correct. Long ago, he put a palm to stone and said, without saying that he would keep it secret and it could keep whatever it had taken. The ground let him stand as long as he wanted and never once suggested he sit where it could finish any last little thing. He counted this as a win. Then the county sent a notice that the boardwalk 2 miles down had to be closed for repairs and reopened before first frost. He came to the ring in the evenings as a luxury. He arrived tired in the way a man gets tired when lumber will not behave, and the crew who played to the edge forget that edges cut. The ring took his tired and used it and gave him back something slightly better, like a jacket turned inside out and shaken. He began to forget what else there had been to fear except work and weather. This was not wisdom. This was the convenience of being told by an old place that it would take certain troubles in hand. The body is not a ledger. It does not know which debts have been paid. It knows only motion. He moved in and out of the ring and trusted the count the way a person trusts a soup to feed whoever arrives. The hum changed him without asking. He took the change because it was handed to him, and he had held out his hands. He learned the lay of the ground by skin and instead of foot. He learned the sound of his own breath when it did not answer to human oversight. He learned the music of a day that could become any other day and refused to. When the circle finally sang in a way that left no doubt, when its melody bent and caught him, and measured his heart against a set of notes that were both kinder and less forgiving than any he had ever been given by a person, when the stones let go of their secret and let themselves glow the color of a bruise you will not admit came from yourself, he understood something useful and helpless. That escape was no longer the word for what stayed outside the ring. The forest released him because it always had. He did not release himself. He stood at the edge of the circle as dark pressed its fingers between the stones, and he knew in the same simple way the body knows, where the next breath lives, that he had been eaten at high noon and did not have the good sense to notice until the sun went home. He stayed until the last light made one thin ribbon across the swell, and then let it go, because every ribbon must lay down somewhere. He walked to the truck and found a message from the office that did not require a voice to answer. He slept and woke. He ate what could be eaten and left what could not. He checked the boardwalk and the signpost, and a new mess where high water had misunderstood the instructions given to it by culvert and ditch. He did not speak the ring's name aloud in any room, and did not put a mark for it on any paper someone might file. He went back the next night, and the next, and the next. Beyond that, each time thinking now it will be different, and each time being told in the body its own alphabet that the kind of different he wanted did not exist in the language the ring spoke. The melody had set itself. The ground would tremble when it had the breath too. The stones would sing when singing matched what his chest could manage. The forest would stand aside the way a good neighbor does, and only come forward if the weather had an argument he could not answer. On the night when the ground truly shook, not turn your ankle shaking, not drop your tool and wince shaking, but the kind that travels up a man's bones and rearranges the order in which they tell him who he is. The ring took him whole. He was standing. He was sitting. He was lying down. He could not have told anyone in which order those acts occurred. The melody began in the soles of his feet and rose into his throat and out the top of his head and left him open to the exact air that had been in this clearing the day before he ever knew what this county was called. He thought, without saying, that he would not leave. He thought, without saying, that leaving and staying were the same shape and differed only in whether a person accepted a count they had not chosen. He passed into a quiet that was not sleep, and not every word people throw around when they mean a clean kind of emptiness. He learned how the heart sounds when it has nothing left to argue for and nothing left to argue against. He learned how many breaths can go by while the body watches its own drills set themselves down and walk away. He learned that the ring was not a mouth and not a machine and not a spirit anyone could name without telling a lie. It was a place where breath becomes time and time becomes a way to hold a person still long enough for the air to memorize them. He did not so much decide as understand that whatever came next would not include walking out and telling someone what had happened. The melody carried his name in a way no one living had managed and set it upon the swell and petarded at once the way a person pats a bed they have made for a guest who has not yet arrived. The forest leaned in kindly and the night arranged itself, and when the last note went quiet, there was no more counting to be done by a mouth that can count. There was only the shape of a man who had agreed to breathe until someone else had learned the rate, and then he rested from that agreement and left the job to the stones. In the morning, the world behaved as though it had lost nothing. Fog drew its small tricks across the creek beds. Birds practiced their plain gossip. The truck stood where it had been left, paint dull with dust and dew, keys in the cup holder, clipboard on the seat. The map showed no ring. Of course, it showed a smooth sweep of topographic lines that never mention the places that hold a person's name, long after the name has learned to keep still. The office called the number twice before lunch and once after. The woman who asked after his nights frowned, then sent a ranger to check the end of the road. The ranger saw the truck and thought of mechanical failure, of a man walking for help, of a heart giving out halfway up a rise. He followed the line of boot prints that began firm and ended where earth had gone too soft to take impressions. He reached the first trees and stopped, because the air ahead of him thickened with that old, difficult, scent-wet stone warmed by hands. He stood at the edge of the clearing, his boots worrying the moss, and looked at the ring. It was unremarkable. It was magnificent. He felt, as most people do at least once, The hesitation between calling out a name and deciding that silence will give a clearer answer. The swell at the center looked recently pressed, as if an animal had taken its rest there. The moss on the nearest stone showed a bare patch shaped roughly like a palm. He wrote it down, because that was what the job required. He went back to the truck and radioed in words that sounded like facts. Vehicle located, subject not present, probable lost hiker, continuing search. Behind the words sat the sense that the air in the clearing had reached out and found his lungs and adjusted their rhythm before he noticed. He coughed once, shook his head, and finished the report. He told himself he would bring a team next morning. He did not go back that afternoon. The road felt longer on the return. When they searched in daylight, the ring was easy to miss. From some angles it looked like a handful of stones laid out by weather. From others, the pattern drew itself plainly. A deliberate circle that gave the lie to every theory about farmers and surveyors. They walked the perimeter, calling, stopping, calling again. The air swallowed the sound halfway to the trees. They found no footprints, no clothing, no broken branch. One of them said, "Place feels like it's listening." The rest smiled the professional smile that keeps fear from putting on a uniform. They marked coordinates, flagging, filed their paperwork. The file grew older, then yellow, then thin again when it was retyped into a digital system that did not keep room for texture or smell. Weeks went, then months. Rain fell enough to turn the lower roads to ruts. Snow leveled the forests and made the circle invisible until thaw. When it melted, the stones shone clean as if scrubbed. The grass in the center came up greener than its neighbors. Birds landed on the edges and left again without sound. People in town stopped asking. A kind of modest story took Chopin accident. An unmarked sinkhole. A man who went walking and made a poor choice of weather. Those were tidy endings. Tidy endings make good sleep. The woman at the office kept his desk as it had been. A coffee ring on a notepad. A pencil with teeth marks. A small pile of field maps. Folded wrong. Sometimes she opened the drawer and looked at the rag that smelled faintly of metal, and for reasons she did not wish to explore. She would press it to her face and breathe the smell until it changed from iron to rain. Once she drove out toward the road, parking where gravel stopped, and stood for a long time looking at the line of trees. She did not step past them. She was not that kind of brave. She whispered a name into the air, half embarrassed, and thought she heard a faint answer in the way wind arranges leaves before it moves on. She told no one about that either. Years after, a new man took the job. He was younger, cheerful, liked to talk. He asked what the old fellow had been like, and people gave the kind of answers that make room for absence. Quiet, capable, knew the backcountry better than the maps did. Someone mentioned the lost hiker case, and they decided to take a look up that way one day. Make sure the trail hadn't gone completely wild. He said it with the easy confidence of a man who has never found something that was NT on a map. He loaded a truck, drove until the road ended, and walked in. The forest had thickened a little, but not enough to hide the path. A photo with it humming under his breath, and found the clearing after noon. The ring waited, stones patient under a film of new moss. He circled once, admiring the symmetry, thinking of old cultures, of rituals that made more sense than they looked like they did. He set down his pack and knelt at the center to take a photograph. The grass there pressed flat and sprang back. The air moved over his shoulders as if measuring him for something. He laughed at himself and said aloud, "Don't be weird," though the sound of it never reached his ears. The words hung in his chest like coins dropped into a fountain. He snapped his pictures as stood to go. The ground pulsed once, nothing dramatic. A small nudge a man could blame on his own blood. Still, he stopped. He felt his breath slow until it matched a rhythm not his own. He waited for the feeling to pass. It didn't. He tried to count backward from 10, a trick he used when nerves played games with him. And when he reached 1, the air pressed closer, warm and damp as if the forest itself had drawn a single, slow breath. He packed his gear quickly and left without looking back. He told no one about the stone circle because he did not want laughter to reduce the weight of what he had felt. He went about his work, whistled while he fixed signs, and told himself he had been tired, maybe dehydrated, yet sometimes alone in the office after hours. He caught himself pausing between tasks, breath held just long enough for something in the silence to count it. The circle did not change. It needed no worship and no witness. It fed on what people brought to it, the small tremor of their pulse, the hint of alarm that rises when the world seems to still. Each visitor added a measure of themselves, and the stones stored it the way Earth stores heat after sunset. They had been doing that longer than memory. They would go on long after memory stopped needing names for the things that fear can build and call home. One night, after a storm took down 2 bridges and work, crews slept in trucks along the county roads. The new man dreamed he was standing in the clearing. In the dream, the stones glowed from within, each pulse echoing the beat under his ribs. He tried to step back, but the air thickened. He saw, or thought he saw, another figure standing in the center, head bent, hands open as if waiting for instruction. The figure raised its face, and for an instant he recognized something familiar in the eyes. Not a person exactly, but the expression a man wears when he finally understands the reason for his own heartbeat. He woke, gasping. The sound he made was not quite human and not quite otherwise. Wendong Kame, he could not record the details of the dream, only that a tune lingered, a low thrum that refused to fade. The next day he went about his rounds with careful efficiency. He did not drive out to the end of the section road. He did not plan to. Yet as evening deepened and the last light turned the horizon the color of bruised brass, he found himself steering that way without thinking. The truck bumped to a stop at the familiar turnout. The forest stood quiet, expectant. He cut the engine and sat a while, listening to the tick of cooling metal and the faint breath of wind through needles. The rhythm settled into something that was almost music. He stepped out, leaving the door open. His boots found the old path. He carried no pack this time, no tools, only the small, thoughtless motion of a man drawn by habit older than reason. The woods grew darker as he walked, but the air ahead glimmered faintly. When he reached the clearing, the stones waited, their edges alive with the color that lives between green and gray, the color of veins under skin. He stood at the edge, uncertain whether he had been expected. The hum found him immediately, climbing through the ground into his legs, gentle as breath against the inside of a shell. He should have turned away. Instead, he took one step, then another, until he stood at the center where the grass lay smooth. He closed his eyes. Far off, thunder rolled once and stopped. The forest held its breath. Then the stones began their old song, low and even, matching his pulse until his pulse forgot its own rhythm and followed theirs. His thoughts thinned, stretched, became light enough to drift. He saw, as in reflection, the figure from his dream standing beside him. The man who had come before looked neither young nor old, neither lost nor found. It simply was an outline filled with slow, patient breathing. The song swelled, deepened. The ground trembled. The air pressed close. For an instant, fear flared in him, sharp and bright, and the stones drank it. They glowed stronger. The fear left him, hollowed, clean. He exhaled once, long and eben, and the light faded into the grass, into the soil, into silence. When the county checked again, weeks later, they found the truck parked neat as before. Keys in the cup holder, clipboard empty. The report filed under his name read, "Missing, presumed, lost." Another tidy ending. The woman at the office filed it where the first one lived. Sometimes, late, she thought she heard music under the floor, a pulse too slow to belong to machines. The forest went on. The ring endured. Seasons turned like pages thumbed by an unseen hand. Moss thickened and thinned. The ground kept its gentle rise. If you stand there on a windless night, you might feel the soil tremble once, testing the air, waiting for the next breath to fall into step. If you hold still long enough, the heartbeat you hear will not be yours, and you will know, in the smallest and most certain part of yourself, that the stones are listening, that they have been all along, that they will be after every name has gone quiet. And if, at that moment, you whisper something, your own name, or no name at all, the air will shift, warm against your skin, grateful for the offering. It will count your breath once, twice, and then keep the rest for itself, as it always does, as it always will.